Hello and welcome. Today is part of our COVID-19 stay-at-home series where we're trying to help people stay productive while they're working from home. So this series is going to be, this session is going to be a little different because we're not going to be walking through specific O365, Office 365 tools like we have in the past, but we're actually going to be engaged with a guest expert on productivity. So I'll introduce Jan here in just a moment. But to start the session, I'd like to ask everyone to be aware of the Q&A panel on the side. So we're going to hold the questions till the end. However, if any question comes up in the meantime while you're listening in, please hit the Q&A panel. This will be recorded, and we'll send that out as a follow-up afterwards as well for all of those if you'd like to forward or share. So before we get going, on the helping ensure productivity and continuity at home for your team. It's really trying to say the productivity expected at the office. How do you ensure that continuity as we go home? So we'll get into that. But before we go there, I always like to just start by saying a little bit about MyTech, just so that you know we're not a podcast organization. We are not a training organization. We really work with small and medium businesses from an IT services and consulting perspective. Over the last 20 years of being in business, we've identified some proven IT strategies that we know can deliver consistent results. And so those are the clients that we're looking for, that they know they want to have a plan and they want consistent results. And in the end, what our goal is look, we have a lot of challenges that we face as businesses, with working from home or HR or finance, et cetera. We're just hoping to take one of those challenges of IT off your table, off the plate, so that you can focus on the things that are highest and best use of your time as a leader in your organization. Our goal as we work with you is to make IT easy, and by collaborating together with the proven IT strategy and understanding the business problems you're trying to solve, our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. So that's the proven results that we can achieve together. But enough about MyTech. This isn't about that. Just want to make sure you know who we are as we dig in here. But I'd like to introduce Jan. Jan Lehman is a productivity expert and coach. In fact, she was one of she coached me a little over a year ago, I believe now, and did an excellent job. She's a speaker. She's an entrepreneur. She's the owner and president at CTC Productivity. I'm not going to read the screen for you, but Jan, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Do you want to say hi and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. It's my favorite topic, and you were fun to coach, Nate, so you were very coachable.
Well, thank you, Jan. I definitely enjoyed it, and as someone who's supposed to be helping their team be productive, I figured I should probably start with myself and see if I can get better at it too. So thank you so much for the help. Okay, so we are going to start with just some of the basics. Just to dig in here. So Jan, how should team leaders really help ensure their team members have the right physical setup? So you spend a lot of time as a business investing in their office environment. What are you recommending, or what do you consider as people venture home?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to know is some people right now are extra challenged working from home, and others, quite honestly, are in their element and loving it. So a lot of people find it's less distracting to work at home during a typical environment, and others, are distracted and might do laundry or yard work. And certainly we've got the extra challenges right now, the kids being at home, but it's important for all team leaders to understand the uniqueness of the situation and the uniqueness of the person. So one of the things you want to do to start with for physical is really find out where they've set up their office, and what that looks like. And I would highly recommend you do that via video. Try to really meet with them via video and see it. So what you're looking for is you want to make sure they're in a quiet and a non-distracting kind of environment. Often what we see happen if people don't have a home office already is they hunker down at the kitchen table, which, as we all know, is the hub of the house. And so that's probably the worst place to be when it comes to distractions. So, you can ask them about some options in their office or in their home. Maybe they've got a folding table in the garage. They can move into an extra bedroom, but what you're trying to do is get them sort of secluded off into as much of a quiet space as possible. There's 2 different types of distractions. One is the auditory distraction, so just hearing noises and being distracted in that way, and then the other is visual. And I'll give you a funny story. I was working with a client, and we were setting up her home office, and she had a beautiful backyard. And so we set her desk looking out over the backyard, and come to find out that it was actually hindering her productivity because she was amazingly creative and intelligent and strategic, and she had struggled from ADD, and she would go off watching the birds and go off task, and it was really kind of interesting. And we just turned her desk around, plain and simple, so she had to look at the wall, but it did the huge things in productivity. So ask your team members, like, where's their physical space? Are they being visually distracted by people walking by or things that are outside? Equally important is the auditory. We've had a number of clients talk about they're in a home office, but they can still hear the kids and what's going on. And this doesn't have to be a huge investment. The simple little, earplugs you get on the airplane are great for sort of numbing out some of that background noise. Another option, I ended up stealing my son's Beats headphones because they have noise reduction and they're outstanding, so I can tune my whole family out. But really get in there, try to people might not realize how much they're being distracted, and so you want to figure out what's going on physically in their environment as a place to start.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up things that not everyone thinks about, which is exactly why you're here, is because that's why how you help people. Just as a quick aside, one of the things that we typically think about relative to a physical setup is we're thinking about, well, when you're in the office, you typically have 2 monitors, or and so try and do that, and that's hard to do at the kitchen table, like you said, right? Is you're usually not setting that up there. So how can you? That's at least where our head goes, right, as far as the physical setup. But great insight there. So okay, so next, so now we've got the physical environment, we've considered those things. What are is there a type of work team leaders should be asking of their team members right now that's different or similar than where they were now since we're working from home?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. So I think the key thing to know is that if you really want to be truly productive, it's really about using your time wisely. And so if your environment is no longer conducive to like deeper thinking work, like, don't fool yourself and think you can do it, because it's not only busy work and unproductive, but it's really highly stressful. So super important here that team leaders, again, gain an understanding of what that environment looks like for their employees, what's realistic for them to be doing right now. So again, recommend kind of video to sort of get a sense of what the environment's like. I was working with a client the other day, and I was coaching her during this lovely coronavirus time, and her toddler kept coming into her office and interrupting her. And so, I immediately knew I needed to shift my advice to her, because I would have typically given her maybe more strategic things to think about. But instead, I shifted to giving her more tactical productivity hacks, because that's way more appropriate to the environment for her right now. So the one big thing I would say for team leaders is, we started off at the beginning of the year with goals of what everybody was going to accomplish, and that world has now changed. And it's super important you go back and rethink what those goals are and re-clarify for everyone, because your really hardworking employees are probably still trucking down that same path of delivering those initiatives. And again, they might be under a lot of unnecessary stress. So, and then for others, again, we've got the other extreme. We have a lot of senior leaders that typically are in, a lot of back-to-back meetings, and they're finding they have a lot of white space on their calendar, which is a nice little treat. And so, again, they've got an opportunity now to switch gears and maybe focus on deeper thinking tasks. Often we recommend think about your infrastructure. So some of your process improvement work that maybe doesn't have a deadline and always gets put on the back burner. Those are great projects right now for people that have some quiet, focused time. And so, for instance, one of the things I'm working on is really delving into my CRM tool. There's great, Nate, you and I both love technology, right? So there's such opportunity in the technology we have today, the Office 365, our CRM tools, all of that. So we're really delving into looking at our CRM and how do we use all the automation features that are within there, so that when life gets back to normal, I've eliminated a bunch of the manual work I do because I've streamlined it. So that's one good example of a thing to do if you've got more time. The other thing I would really recommend to team leads right now is another really important part of their job that often gets on the back burner, And that's really your people development. And if you're really investing in your people and their success, you're going to see huge spikes in productivity. So, for instance, I had a senior leader. Again, I'm coaching right now that he has a little bit more time right now. He's certainly got some high stress decisions to make, but he's got more time without the meetings. And so we've started working, and it's something for you to consider, is started mapping out, if he wants to retire in 5 years, what are all the roles he plays in the organization, and what are the skills that are required for those particular roles, and then mapping out like, okay, well, who needs what development in order to step into that particular role, and just take advantage of this time right now to really coach very specifically around some of those skill gaps. It would be a great use of your time. The other thing I'd say for type of work is a good thing to do is to set up a schedule. So maybe you aren't going to be able to have, 8 hours of, quiet, uninterrupted time. But if you can set up a schedule for the kids, maybe when they're done with school, they've got an hour of creative work, an hour of outside time. You might be able to carve out and figure out, okay, I can have 1 hour in there where I can do some deeper thinking. Yeah. So laying out a bit of a schedule for the house, because half the interruptions are from the kids. I don't know about you guys, but for me, half the interruptions are the kids saying, Mom, I'm bored and I don't know what to do. So being a little proactive and laying out a plan will give you a little bit more quiet time. Another option is, if you are lucky and there's other adults in the house or teenagers, is to kind of swap duties and say, hey, you take charge of the toddlers, for an hour while I do some deeper thinking. And we do that all the time in a business environment. I had a sales team. I had to get them to do a schedule because they were all complaining they couldn't do deeper thinking strategic work because the phone was always ringing. And so we said, just, do some phone blocking, right? You cover the phones while I do my deeper thinking, and we switch. So same strategies back in the office can work in the home environment. The overall goal, what we're going for, and Nate, you know this because we talked about it a lot, is every single time you get interrupted, you lose on average 20 minutes. So again, just be smart about what you're focused on. If you can't do deeper thinking work, don't do it, because it's in the end a waste of your time. So those hopefully some ideas there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, several of the items just jotted down several different notes you made, and I it's good to be reminded of one of those last comments you made, which is, every time you get interrupted, you typically lose around 20 minutes. And so, that's so challenging, especially right now. And I think, where my head's going, it makes me want to ask you this next question. But I think about part of the reason and why you this information that you just mentioned about thinking about the type of work is because people are challenged now differently, and just being aware of and acknowledging those differences, and how can you support them, your team, through that. Again, depends on the role, right, of the person and what you're having them do, but yeah, I think it's good for us as managers and leaders to be aware of that. But I think Again, I think this applies whether people are working from home in the middle of this pandemic, or is this people working at home in other times. I think it applies there too. So I want to make sure that, yes, this is applicable now, but it's also applicable in the future. But in particular now, there's kind of this heightened anxiety and just uncertainty about the world, right? About people's jobs and all that. So how as leaders, would you recommend us supporting kind of, I guess, on an emotional side, from just help mitigating some of those those challenges or helping your team through those challenges if they're facing them?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's especially challenging right now. I have a number of friends that are therapists, and they're seeing a huge spike in depression. So it's super important that team leads are putting on their kind of emotional hat and working with their employees, not just getting them to be productive on the tasks they're working on, but making sure they're feeling that right support. So, good thing to know is video, again, awesome communication tool. 93% of what we communicate is through our body. And so you don't want to just be on the phone with one of your employees or team members and asking how they're doing. You really want to see their face. And I had this happen a couple of months ago with a client. It still just was so impactful. She was a high performer, amazingly talented woman. And I had like one development area I was told to work on with her, and I was coaching her and luckily had her on video. And I brought up that one development area and I could just see a little tear drip down, and I would never have known. Her voice, the inflection didn't change, and I could just see she's so critical and so hard on herself. And so right now you definitely want to be as face to face as you can be, seeing their expression when you're asking those questions. First off, be sure you're asking the questions right, how they're doing. The daily huddles for sure are, not only a great strategy for productivity, making sure people, have a plan and they're accomplishing what they're supposed to, but build into that the emotional aspect of how are we doing, a little touch base with everybody, super important. Lots of one-on-ones, super big there. Ultimately, you've got to be in the right mental mindset to be productive. And so whatever you can do to support that person. If the environment is just not conducive for them to get any work done, quite honestly, give your team member a break. Let it go and let them know they're going to take advantage of this time to kind of refresh and come hit the ground running when life gets back to normal, whatever a new normal will look like. Also, I would definitely encourage you to talk openly. If it's certainly, hopefully, the environment financially is fine for your company, reassure your employees, because otherwise, it's like the kids will hear the parents fighting and assume there's going to be a divorce, right? So they're hearing these rumblings and they're assuming the business might go out, might close. And so if you're in a good place, reinforce that so people can, again, be focused on their work and not have that worry in the back of their head. Even I would say tell your employees, get out, just go for a walk. It's amazing what nature does for productivity. So again, if they're not focused, they don't have the right environment, emotionally, just tell them to take a break. And I don't know about you guys, but some of my most strategic thinking happens when I'm out for a walk. Totally. So yeah, nature does some pretty cool things.
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges that I just speak about myself personally from everything you're just talking about is that the core part of my personality being in our vernacular that we use a tool called Make a Difference, and there's lions, camels, turtles, and monkeys, and so I'm a lion in
You're
that
a lion?
vernacular.
I would have thought you'd be a turtle. I don't know.
Right. Yes. So I'm a lion, and that's very task oriented and driven and those kind of things. And so it's hard for me to recognize sometimes those things that you're just talking about, and it's hard for me to because I oftentimes don't feel those things as a lion. That's just not something that my personality oftentimes feels. And so I think and I know that there's leaders of all types of personalities, but there are certain personality types as leaders that I think have to just be more intentional because they're not naturally inclined to some of those emotional support needs that you're just talking about. So I know that's something that I've really worked on as a manager over the years because, like I said, naturally it's not the first thing that I typically want to talk about. I typically want to dig into that task or dig into that thing. As opposed to the softer side, so to speak.
No, well said. And the other thing we see a lot of is leaders often make a lot of assumptions, right? And they do, just like you're saying, they sort of assume everybody is the way they are. And so, yeah, you and I are wired the same, Nate. We're both like task people, and it's super important though that you, find out the real situation.
Yeah. And I think you're right from a video perspective. I love that. And the world's really easy to do video now. I mean, like, how incredible is it that, I mean, not that this pandemic is like a blessing by any means, it's not, but like from a standpoint of that this is happening in a time and place when video is relatively easy and people can still stay connected, which makes me think of, well, so how, other than, just doing some of the video you talked about, like how should, as a team leader, really helping that engagement, and I don't know if there are things that you would suggest that's different from a team, like peer-to-peer, cross-functional teams, anything in particular that you feel that, leaders should really be doing to drive engagement at these times?
Yeah, so this is my personal passion. I'm just shocked at how much productivity and employee engagement are really tightly linked. And so, yeah, people, if you're providing the right support and guidance and all of that, you're actually going to drive engagement, which ultimately drives productivity. So one of the things, I think we are in a really unique situation right now where, maybe we start going with the grain a little bit and encouraging, team leaders to get to know the toddler that's crawling across their mom's lap, right, when they're trying to have a staff meeting.
Yes.
But we don't do it enough. Years ago, we'd have more company-wide family picnics and everybody would hang out. And, sadly, budgets have been cut and we end up, if you're lucky, your spouse gets invited to the family or the company event. And so, to put it in perspective, I'm a huge fan of Gallup, and Gallup's done some great research, on employee engagement, and they know the connection between productivity and engagement. And what I find interesting is they came up with 12 questions. So they call them the Q12s, the Q12.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about those Q12 is 2 of the 12 are all about personal relationships. And so one is, do you have a best friend at work, which is really interesting. So to your point, I think there's a great opportunity for people to take time to get to know their colleagues. So again, as a team leader, maybe you can help facilitate that. But how do you build these relationships? Again, maybe now is a good time to do that, to get to know families on a deeper level. And the other question within the Q12 is, does anybody at work care about you as a person? So did you know that, Nate? I don't know if you study the Q12.
I have read on some of that from employment engagement, but yeah, I am definitely don't have it down as much as you. But
yeah,
so
well, and to me, I find it really surprising. And so I'm just sort of reinforcing here again, if you can't really be focusing on projects and bigger initiatives, maybe the focus really is on building these personal relationships, because it will pave the path for really loyal partnerships with your employees. And so one of my sort of goofy thing I've been tossing out there, I don't know if anybody's going to do it, but why not have a video with your lunch and one of your team members' families? Have you're sitting across the table, and it just, again, go with the grain. And just, if your kid's going to be stumbling across during a staff meeting, why don't you engage them and talk to the child and build relationships with the family at a deeper level?
yeah, no, that's great. I think I do remember, in fact, we did a culture, we do an employee engagement survey on a regular basis and on a monthly basis. And we, it's something that we try and work on with our team members to see how we do it. And again, the same kind of thing we were just talking about from an emotional support perspective. There are also certain personality types from a leadership perspective that are less inclined to do exactly what you're suggesting too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I am one of those, by the way, and I am one of those that's guilty of that. And I can tell you that in the last few years, and I don't know, it's just because like I'm over 40 now, and so like in the last few years that's been something that I've just come to that part of my life or something. But I have so much more enjoyed working. I feel like, not that I didn't enjoy working with the team that I had, previously or whatever. It's just that I feel like I've so much more enjoyed just working together, because I think we've been more intentional about knowing our coworkers' kids' names, and asking about them and knowing what they're dealing with, and even connecting on Facebook, because it sounds kind of silly, but just kind of
Yep.
staying up on their personal lives more than just at work. So
Yep.
so that's great. I love, because you're absolutely right. I was just thinking about a call that we had, a team call, and one of our team members had their baby that's about 6 months old sitting on their lap, right? And so you saw them, and it was just cool. And everyone's once she didn't have her video on actually, and then we're like, hey, where's your video? She turned it on, and everyone was like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody loved it, So I think
Love it.
just encouraging stuff like that is great. I love that
Well,
you talked about that.
yeah, no, and you realize most of us, I think like 60-70% of us are visual learners. So I tell you, somebody might tell me that they had a boy or a girl and I don't remember, but if I see a baby girl in pink on your on your lap, I'm going to remember it's a girl, right? So
Right.
it's visual is such a better communication tool than just auditory.
All right, good. So we've hit on some big topics. So any tips, as we're kind of having about 5 minutes left here, and then we'll open up for Q&A, everyone, just so you know. Any tips that you recommend from a technology perspective for team leaders in this time that they should be maybe doing differently to help with this?
Yeah, I'm going to touch on one that maybe is the opposite of what you might think I'd touch on. So you and I, again, huge fans of leveraging technology. So I'm super excited that people are we're sort of pushed into using Office 365 a bit more, and really leveraging it. But I want to give a little watch out again for team leaders to be aware of this. So the video and the chat features within Office 365 and a lot of these tools are outstanding. They're fabulous, but I want you to realize that those are the equivalent of walking into somebody's cube or office and interrupting somebody. And so from a productivity standpoint, I want to caution everyone that you don't go too crazy with them. It's really important that you know people's preferences and you really, again, maybe understand their schedule. So think of, a mom with a young child at home and she gets 1 hour right now when her child's napping, and you're going to chat with them right during her 1 hour when she's trying to focus. I personally would be very stressed. So it's really important in this day and age, and also when you get back to the office, that you really understand people's communication preferences. Do they really want you chatting with them constantly and interrupting, or would they prefer it be more scheduled? So leveraging some of the features like the do not disturb, turning off notifications in chat, super important to be aware of. Even though it feels like we don't need to have our calendars scheduled right now, I would recommend you have your team members schedule when they might have quiet, uninterrupted time on their calendar, like again, when a child is napping, and encourage everybody to check the calendar before they interrupt others. Other things would be explore some apps. I had a client the other day that told me he snuck into the office at night because they're not supposed to be there, but he really needed to scan some things. And I, made him aware of free scanners on his phone. And so just explore their technology because, yeah, there's so much we can do virtually these days.
Yeah, that's great. Forgive me, Jan, I'm going to use that as a shameless plug of this series for those who might not have been doing it. Because, that's, kind of where our head went, is that we've been doing and hosting these kind of events and talking with people about how they can use these tools better, in person. And we had several people ask us over the last couple of years of, can you do them virtually? And we were thinking, yeah, we should probably do that someday. Well, guess what? Because of all this, we're now doing these all virtually, multiple times a week. So, but no, those are great tips. It's almost, what you made me think of, and I'll have one more question to wrap up before we open it up, is that I think there's almost like a different etiquette coming around relative to using these tools. Like, while in Teams, I could really quickly just hit the call button or do a video chat, right? But yeah. I don't know what they're doing right now, and so I'm trying to ask, hey, is it okay if I call you? Because I don't want to presume that it's okay. Like there's some, but even that could be disturbing. So I need to be careful about that. But I do feel like there's a slightly different etiquette, that just because that we're working remotely doesn't mean that we're automatically completely available any moment of any day to anyone. So great tip you're right, I wasn't expecting that. All right, so one last question, then we'll open it up as we wrap up here. So any, I don't know, predictions on what the future might look like as it relates to productivity, either in our current situation or as we all get back to the office at some point later this year?
Yeah, well, I think both of you and I have known the potential of Office 365, and I think through this work at home environment, hopefully others are seeing the potential. So I'm super excited about what's to come with our clients starting to leverage that more. The other thing I'm excited about is I have a number of clients that I know would do better working from home because they would be in a less disruptive environment. And I'm talking in the future when life gets back to somewhat normal. But they have managers that won't allow it because they're a little bit afraid of, I don't know what they're working on and all of that. And so I'm hoping that this opportunity is giving team leaders a chance to start to build some trust and realize, wow, man, they cranked out a lot of stuff working from home, and allow that freedom, because it's a great recruiting strategy. It's a great productivity strategy to be able to offer work from home options. So I'm hoping that's a shift we see as well.
I think that's a great final point, is that there should be lessons learned out of this, and how do we as businesses review our work from home policies, or revisit some of these different areas of how we allow that. I know one of our clients, he mentioned to me, is like, someone has to be an employee for a year before they're eligible. Like just from that, there's some little things like that, but and the other thing is, I've found, and we've talked to folks that they've been working from home and they feel like they're stir crazy. So it's also, I think some of the problem that people that I've heard, at least if you see some of the dialogue and some of the blogs and posts about this stuff, is that in the past, work from home used to be work from home 100% of the time, or work from the office 100% of the time. And several things that you brought up on this session are more about understanding the type of work you're doing, and what type of work that you do is more conducive at the office, and what type of work that you do is more conducive at home, and how do you segment that appropriately.
Well said.
So thank you. That's a great tip, because I think that is an important thing that businesses are going to have to revisit as we get back to, like you said, somewhat normal moving forward. So with that said, we're at our time. I do want to thank you for attending, and thank everyone for attending. I do want to open up to the Q&A, and there's several notes I have here. We'll probably stick around for another 10 to 20 minutes, depending on the questions that come through. But Stephanie, can you open it up for any questions in the Q&A panel?
Yes, we do have one here. Do you have any recommendations on how to show your productivity when your manager doesn't always know what you're working on?
Oh, I love that. So status updates are always good. Sadly, no news is, or when they don't hear something, often they think nothing's happening. So proactively giving an update, maybe every day, every week, what you've done, what you're accomplishing. Even starting off the week to say, here's my priorities, here's what I plan to do, will let them know that you've got good intentions. So yeah, it's proactive communication is often what's necessary. I hope that helps.
Mm-hmm. Got another question here. How can realistic goals be set when working from home?
So that one, I guess, ties back again to everything we talked about, that you need to be realistic with yourself, and you need to have some honest conversations with your team leader. So if they're pushing you to do things that you just are not feasible right now, it is really important they do become realistic, right? So having a conversation about what's doable, how much focus time I have, and then shifting that is really the best advice I can give there.
Awesome. I don't see any questions.
Awesome, Stephanie. I've got one you talked about, because I think something you brought up earlier, Jan, was when you said someone you were coaching, you suggested kind of thinking through a methodology that if those who are listening are familiar with the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, one of the concepts there is the accountability chart, which is different from an org chart, because it speaks directly to the point you brought up earlier, in that if people in your organization are sitting in multiple seats or wearing multiple hats, that gives you ability to do planning long term. So I don't know, that's at least one tool that I'm aware of relative to something you brought up earlier, Jan, but are there other helpful, because I think that I remember going through that exercise as my tech, and we struggled with that. So can you talk, especially for those executives or leaders out there that are like, I have too much on my plate, or I'm trying to think of transition planning, and not necessarily in this moment, in the next couple of weeks, but long-term, road mapping, and trying to figure out from a career and professional development perspective. Any tips or tricks or tools that you'd recommend there?
So Nate, ask that again. I'm not sure I know what tools to use to kind of map out like delegation of tasks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, it was you brought up at one of the executives that you were coaching that you encouraged him to use this time. It was like a 5-year plan. It was like, hey, I'm sitting in these different roles and seats in the organization. How to help people think through that, or any tools or tips on that?
Yeah, so as far as the physical tool to do that, I'm a big fan of don't make it more complicated by introducing a new tool. So in this particular case, he actually asked that question, and I said, he loves Excel. I'm like, just use Excel. You use it all the time. Just start mapping out. But what you're really doing is trying to identify, where does my time go? So listing out sort of the blocks of work that you work on, so you get a sense of all the hats that you wear. And then from there, just mapping out what the particular skills are that would be needed to take over that role. And then you can start mapping out like maybe the individuals you think may take over that responsibility and where those gaps are. So I don't know if I answered it completely, but I'm a big fan of just using tools you already know, and that you're focusing more on the manipulation of the data versus learning a new feature.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's one of the tips that I remember when the aha moment came. The aha moment came for us. It was because we were so caught up in trying to learn the differences of the language and the vernacular, and really what you just said. It was really about, hey, I'm actually, like my business partner Leaf. He's wearing the hat of the CEO, the CFO, the COO. He's really doing a lot of those roles, and so it was really trying to say, let's acknowledge that, and then exactly what you said is understand, well, what people in the organization who we developed do we need to hire to this. So that was definitely a big aha moment, and it's a really effective planning tool for those executives. Again, it was huge for us when we did it. Okay, so the other thing I had is, and you mentioned this, team leaders, team members, managers, and they're working with their team. I think what some or many of us are experiencing right now is a lower volume, not all of us, but a lower volume of work. So you might have a typical task and to-do list that fills up 8 hours every day, no problem, with probably some overlap, but we might be finding folks that we really don't have a full 8 hours anymore, and so people might be sitting idle. So are there any tips or suggestions you have for the manager to queue up or kind of have readily available of these other, to use this time, like training? You alluded to training and professional development. Are there any other things that you'd recommend that managers do in this time to help their team?
Yeah, I think it's again, maybe helping brainstorm on, I'm a huge fan of process improvement. So, I mean, each and every person, there's an opportunity for them to look at what they do every day and think of a better way of working. I think that one, and then the people development one. I'm trying to think if there's any other. The other thing is take into account the individual. So if you've got like a good person that just loves to tinker with technology, you want to make sure you're picking some special projects and giving them to the right people would be a big caution. So if you know somebody loves to tinker with technology, maybe you're going to say, hey, I want you to take on this project of going exploring, again, your CRM tool and tinkering around, something that would get them super excited and they would dive into it, versus something that they might really drag their feet and hate doing. So I would be careful about the assignment of all these miscellaneous projects to who you assign them to. Yeah,
no, that's great point. I think that's definitely something that we forget. People aren't always naturally inclined for certain tasks and initiatives. So,
we do have a question that came across.
Oh, please.
Awesome. This person's asking, how do you help staff that are hesitant with Teams or chat due to being really comfortable with email?
Say that again, Stephanie. If they're
so they're hesitant to use like the chat feature inside Teams or other chat platforms because they're really comfortable with email. Do you have any tips to help drive them to adopt more of the chat function versus using email for all communication?
Yeah, so this is interesting. We are definitely going through a major shift where all our communication used to happen in email, and now it's coming over into, again, these Teams channels and chat and all of that. The one thing I would say is, when you really get into exploring Teams and how that works and the channels of conversation, quite honestly, a lot of the things you hate about email are going to go away. So the dreaded like reply all and those sort of things. And so there's lots of good reasons to start exploring this new technology. Everybody we know that we've been helping get onto the technology really loves it. It easily allows you to onboard a new person onto your team, and you don't have to remember what past emails you need to forward to them to get them up to speed. So as far as how to get people comfortable I would say just start dabbling with it. Maybe you've got a colleague or a friend that you are comfortable with, and you can ask to, like, let's play the video back and forth. Let's practice the video and screen sharing, and then let's chat. And, in an environment that feels sort of safe, just pick a friend to kind of play with that technology. Hopefully, I had a client the other day, and that's what he wanted to do at the first part of the coaching call. He's like, can we do video chat so I can practice sharing screens, because I don't think I know what I'm doing. And I thought it was kind of cute, but it was real. So hopefully that helps the listener.
Yeah, and Stephanie, if I might add something on that, I think sometimes what gets confusing is, as an organization, have you specified a communication tool? Right?
Yes.
Like, so for instance, one of the challenges that we had was we had half of our organization using Slack and half of our organization using Skype. And we basically had to make an organizational decision. It wasn't a technology decision, it was a business decision to say, we are going to use Teams. And so that's one of the things that, if your organization hasn't done that, I think sometimes can cause a challenge. And the other one is a little tip that, especially relative to chat, is thinking about it, challenging the person to say, especially anything internal, right? Externally, like email is still a thing, and use that, and you should, but internally in particular, if you can just think of, and I caught myself the other day doing the exact same thing. I was about to send an email to some folks, and I'm like, wait a second. I should put it in chat or in a Teams channel. So I catch myself, because it's a behavioral habit that, depending on how long you've been in the workforce, people have had for years or decades. So just really thinking about anything internal, try and convert that over to a Teams conversation or a chat conversation versus email. That might be another little tip that could help too.
Yeah, that's good, Nate.
Well, with that said, I think we have everything. I didn't want to go too long because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, especially yours, Jan. So I do want to say thank you very much for joining us today. I just love that you bring such a unique perspective and an expert productivity perspective to the table. And I'm looking forward to sharing this. This will be shared on our website, and I'm going to share it, make sure that every manager on our team sees it, because I thought you got some great tips that they're going to be able to use, and helping work with our team as we're all working remotely and virtually now. So any final comments or takeaways that you have before we sign off for everyone? I know I'm kind of catching you off guard here, but any final takeaways?
No, I'd say be optimistic. I think the world needs a little bit of more optimism right now. So again, as a team leader, just that's another part of your job right now, is being optimistic and be excited about the future and some of the cool changes that'll be coming from all of this.
All right, very good. Well, thanks everyone. I'm Nate Austin. This is Jan Lehman, and Stephanie Kingsley was producing. Have an excellent day, and everyone please stay safe and stay healthy.
Great. Bye. Thank you.